everyone, my name is Marcel Bogers and I'm Professor of Open and Collaborative Innovation at Eindhoven University of Technology.
And my name is Marisol Menendez, and I'm an open innovation practitioner since 2012. And open innovation is my passion. And we welcome to this new session of World Open Innovation Conversations. For those who are listening to us for the first time, let me tell you a little bit about this. These are a set of conversations, as the name says, among friends, but also among top experts worldwide discussing relevant topics that are writing the future and the present of open innovation. We invite leaders to have this discussion, and we also like to have this unstructured somehow conversations among friends. Like we're having a good time talking about the topics that we really enjoy.
Yeah, and in a way, this is our own open innovation effort, I would say. So we want to bring together academics, practitioners, policymakers, and open innovation enthusiasts like yourself to discuss and develop new ideas and insights based on different diverse perspectives as a true melting pot of innovation, I may say. In both the World Open Innovation Conference and the World Open Innovation Conversations, we want to bring together theory and practice by connecting academia and industry or policy. Because we believe this is the best way to learn about best practices in open innovation and what the theories behind them really are.
Well, yes, and if you're tuning for the first time, I invite you to listen to our previous chapters. So far, we've done 3 1-hour episodes where we had top experts with us, mixing in the same chapter the academia perspective and the industry or practitioner perspective. So far, we've had Henry Chesebrough, of course, father of open innovation, and a great friend, I would say, and some other amazing guests such as Anita McGahan, Miguel Arias, Carlis Baldwin, Diane Finkhausen, Hans de Jong, Ingrid Willems, Marianne Weil, Marcus Nordberg, and Rudy Beckers. For me, it's truly a privilege to have shared time with them.
Yes, I totally agree with you, Marisol, on that. And as you also know, we had sections dedicated to insights from the academic perspective on the one hand, with our colleagues Agnieszka Radziwon, Kritika Randawa, and Oana Stefan, who were our academic experts. And at the same time, we got great insights from Graham Cross, Oana Maria Pop, and Alberto Tornero, who gave us more a practice perspective on the respective topics that we discussed in the earlier episodes. But now we will continue in a kind of a new era of our podcast series, in a way with shorter episodes and deeper conversations with specific guests. And I would say in a way that, let's say in the spirit of innovation, this is also how we continuously explore and experiment and find the right way to learn about what we are doing ourselves and further develop accordingly. So with that, Marisol, what do you think? Are we ready to kick off today's session?
We are ready, Marcel. We are ready, and we are launching today our series of episodes connected to the human side of open innovation, which is also the theme for this year's World Open Innovation Conference. Today's session is called Communities for Digital Innovation. I can say, as a practitioner, that this falls directly into one of the hot topics around open innovation. Of course, software and digital technologies are omnipresent today and defining our future. We can see that communities are the most common way to address challenges and face the wicked problems of technology, those that can be solved by one entity alone. And these are defining and devising the new ways that to affront those problems with amazing global and local examples. Of course, open source software, for me, this is a difficult set of words to say. Open source software in particular is showing a growing trend across sectors, and we can see that every day, not only within small companies or startups, but also with big corporations.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that, Marisol. And maybe a little secret here. I have to admit that as academics, we tend to be a little bit behind on what's happening in practice, as we're typically looking back at what has already happened in the real world, and we try to adapt our research accordingly. But in a way, along those lines, this is also, I think, how we add theory to what is happening in practice. And in a way, I think I actually observe similar trends as you just described. And for me, I think it fits very well with how I think I would at least describe open innovation as, say, a distributed innovation process that involves knowledge flows across organizational boundaries based on pecuniary and non-pecuniary mechanisms in line with an organization's business model. Now, I know, of course, that this is a very academic definition, but in the context of open source software, I believe it is really critical to understand exactly what underpins first those knowledge flows, then how both monetary and non-monetary incentives play a role in this context, and indeed what it means for business models, not only for organizations that traditionally have already worked with open source software, but for others as well. And then I totally agree with you that it is an important topic that can really help us, I think, to, as you say, address some of the complex problems through open innovation, but for which we also need to consider the human side, as you also emphasized. As far as I can see it, I think the academic research on open source software and open innovation has helped to understand some of these aspects, but I think more work needs to be done. So hopefully we can explore some of these relevant questions in today's episode. And that's why I think it's so interesting to have today's guests here and the topic. So I would say, without further ado, let's introduce our guest. Our guest here is Hilary Carter, who is the Vice President for Research at the Linux Foundation. I would say that Linux and the Linux Foundation are really central players in the open source software domain, and I'm really looking forward to hearing more from Hilary about when she introduces herself and learn more about what she's doing in the Linux Foundation and what's happening there. For now, let me just quote. I looked up, Hilary, your description on your LinkedIn page, and I found a very fitting quote, which was, you described yourself as creating technology insights that inform and transform government, enterprise, and society. So with that, I think you will be a perfect guest for our conversations here. And I may add that you are also very committed to supporting our World Open Innovation Conference, where we will be able to also further discuss some of these issues as well.
Hilary, welcome. Welcome to World Open Innovation Conversations. Thanks for sharing with us this time. I think that having you today is a perfect representation of the mix of practice and research, which we love, by the way, and what we are continuously looking to get into this podcast. As we said before, we are looking to explore more about the human side of open innovation. Beginning with communities for digital innovation seems to be a great topic to explore, of course. And Linux is one of the greatest examples of community doing innovation. So let's start from the very beginning, no? And please explain a little bit more about yourself. And if you can, let us know a little bit more about what does Linux Foundation do.
Well, thank you very much, Marcel and Marisol. It is a pleasure for me to have this opportunity to have a conversation today among friends to talk about a topic I'm extremely passionate about, which is open source innovation and mass collaboration, and how by working together, we're creating tremendous value to solve real world problems. And so the Linux Foundation, for those who haven't heard of the Linux Foundation before, we are a neutral home that hosts the world's most prolific and consequential open source software, hardware, and standards that touch every facet of our lives. So we provide a neutral home to physically host the technologies, but also a framework for how those technologies are continually developed, improved, released, sustained, promoted, and how they can scale. So it is very much a broad focus, but rooted in a need for openness, a need for leveraging the best of human talent to create shared value and to create better outcomes. And of course, we are a global nonprofit organization, and we benefit from people who are involved from all geographies, all industries. There are all ages, so many different languages represented in our project communities. And our technologies touch every facet of society. As I say, in government, in enterprise, and society at large, the code that underpins the world, much of it comes from the project communities hosted at the Linux Foundation.
Wow. I think this is like a broad concept, a broad topic. No, we could talk about open innovation and all the neighborhood topics. Just talking about the case of Linux Foundation, because you were talking about technologies, about all this collaboration among different communities. We also talked about the real implications and use that it has every now and then. No, I think that it is most commonly known for this community action, no? How we are living the community interaction and collaboration to create or to work for a single objective. How do you live these communities working and creating value together from within Linux?
Well, we were very fortunate to have a solid foundation through the namesake project of the Linux Foundation, which is, of course, the Linux kernel, essentially the operating system for the world that underpins so many of the devices that exist today. Linux is everywhere. It runs all of the world's supercomputers, the stock exchanges, everyday devices like dishwashers, aircraft systems, automotive systems, health and safety devices. So the proliferation of Linux paved the way for a model that other industries could replicate, to move beyond a central operating system to other types of technologies that could be built in a similar fashion through openness, through community-wide collaboration, through frameworks that encouraged many participants to get involved. And so the principles of Linux were very well known and well understood. Those principles being that many eyes, Linus's law, many eyes make bugs shallow. That is a law named after the creator of the Linux kernel, Linus Torvalds, who by opening up his technologies to the world, he invited the greatest minds and the greatest collaborators and innovators to make recommendations, to make improvement suggestions, to propose new features. And that openness produced ideal outcomes. And other communities thought, well, if we can do it for an operating system, surely we can do it to improve networking technologies, cloud technologies, enterprise blockchain technologies, artificial intelligence, and machine learning technologies. There's no reason why this model cannot be replicated time and time again, and that is exactly what has happened at the Linux Foundation. So leveraging a history of very effective innovation, the Linux Foundation provided this sort of natural harbor to host umbrella technology projects.
I mean, I think this is a great description, and I think you provide several examples of sort of positive impact that is currently generated. I think at the same time also when you describe the sort of the origin and the history, you make it sound like a very positive thing, which in hindsight we can see it is, and I think we agree on that. But I think at the same time it had also been perceived in slightly different ways, including by maybe those organizations who are now adopting the model and operating system and so on. So I'm just curious if you can say a little bit more about that evolution of how sort of from the origination of the operating system, how it evolved to where it is now, and what maybe made the change of this being so widely adopted in contrast to the early phase.
Well, I think organizations understood that there was no need to recreate technologies that were already freely available and open by license for use and redistribution. That the cost savings alone led to the commercialization of Linux and Linux distributions, followed by the commercialization of other technologies that were born in open environments. And that's okay. It's okay to create businesses around open technologies and to commercialize, because value is still being created by organizations. It is a free market to innovate on top of open source code and provide services around that code's implementation. And it encourages more people to contribute back. If open source code lends itself to creating sustainable business models for enterprise, then those enterprises reinvest in maintaining and sustaining and growing the source code on which their business models now depend. But it's more than that now. It's honestly about a fundamental need, not just to stay competitive, but to manage things like regulatory risk or other types of common challenges that face industries. And by working on a lower level of the technology stack, a base layer of the technology stack, organizations are free to innovate up the technology stack. And yet the competitive spirit isn't misaligned at all. So we see competitors coming together, different fierce competitors coming together to solve common challenges, because in many cases these competitors don't want to be technology first organizations. They want to be services first organizations, or they want to be creative storytelling organizations, or they want to create investment value in the case of banks and financial services. They're not terribly interested in becoming competitive with each other on operational technologies. Rather, they can compete higher up the stack on things like customer service, on things like innovative customer products, on adding more shareholder value or investment value. But the cost savings that they enjoy by working together on base layer technologies is significant.
We, in the communities of corporations that I work with or collaborate with, we sometimes say that we are building better roads so we can run better races, no? And I think that main topic that you discussed, like regulation or creating these common infrastructures that at the end will maybe make a bigger pie for all of us, or maybe keep our own competitiveness, is a critical factor, I think, to look for collaboration, as well as facing these wicked challenges or those problems that are greater than the capability of solution of a single organization. No?
That's right. And there is a benefit beyond cost savings and beyond working on common challenges, and that is around talent. A number of enterprises find that they are able to retain talented team members or attract new talent from the marketplace because of their participation in open source project communities. It positions them as being openly innovative, forward thinking, collaborative, and that culture tends to lend itself to attracting some of the world's top minds and talent. So that human resources factor is as important as the business value that's generated from sustaining open source projects. And it's not necessarily well known or understood. And I think that's why we are doing more research in these areas to try to describe and measure the value across different aspects of open source ecosystems.
And could you say a little bit more about that? Because I'm indeed aware, you're interested in the topic, try to do some research, which is I think why you are also the right person, who is sitting on the boundary of research and practice. Based on what you have seen and done so far, could you somehow, let's say, conceptualize a little bit, which are the attributes of value that you are exploring? How would you measure that, or how can you see it in practice when you want to implement that type of research?
Yeah, there's a tremendous need for data around the benefits and challenges of open source project communities. And so anytime we can generate data-driven insights, this type of knowledge set helps to influence our programming. It helps to influence budget formation. It helps to validate our assumptions, not just navigate in the dark. And so when we conduct a survey, when we conduct empirical research or do qualitative interviews to paint a picture of the value proposition and some of the real challenges that open source communities are facing, this seemed to be extremely beneficial because it's filling a gap. I'll give you an example. Last year, we launched a study in the financial services sector about the state of open source for banks and asset managers. And what we discovered in that process was that a significant number of our survey respondents, there were 46% of them, were prohibited from contributing to open source project communities, either on behalf of their organization or in their personal time in the evenings. The regulatory environment in financial services is so prohibitive, and that does a disservice to innovation because it prevents clever people from contributing even to a passion project that may have nothing to do with their organization. It could be in health code or any other kind of repository, but there's a real barrier, and so we then need to navigate those barriers and provide pathways to try to overcome them. In other conversations, also within the financial services sector, with IT leaders from financial services, they see that recruiting talent is more difficult without having open source project communities as part of the job responsibilities. That people want to work in open source. They find it intellectually rewarding. They find it high value work. It's fun. It's highly enjoyable. And that insight comes up again and again in the surveys that we run. People enjoy contributing to open source project communities. So enterprises who put up a barrier to participation in the long run do themselves a disservice. And it's up to us to have conversations to try to overcome those barriers, to host a roundtable with regulators or with legal departments to say, is there a way that we can manage your concerns, manage legal risk, and create an environment that sustains innovation for everybody's benefit?
I come from big part of my background is from the financial industry, and I feel what you say. And I've seen it firsthand that if you are bringing in talent that is creative or to develop all these new technologies, these people also have the need to find creative outlets for their own talent. And of course, maybe the banks are not as always the best place for those talents show. So this complementarity by connecting to communities also helps them thrive and improving their own abilities, which is interesting. And I think that this topic that you're raising on how to implicate regulation, how to convince those who are decision makers, but also how to articulate what the community is doing to show the value to everyone. I think it brings forward one of the other main topics that are, I think, the core of how to arrange or manage these communities, which is the governance. How can we create the right kind of governance to promote and make sure that create the transparency for the value sharing, to make everyone convinced that they can collaborate? No, I don't know if you can tell us a little bit about the governance.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I too, Marisol, by the way, I came from the financial services sector. For 10 years, I worked in banking. I worked for UBS Bank for the last 5 years of those 10, and understand the anti-money laundering challenges, the know your client regulations, and so on. And the other irony about the financial services sector, before we move on to governance, is that they consume more than 95% of open source technologies in their operational stacks. That there is a one-way street. They absolutely know the economic value of consumption of open source code, but they do not contribute back to open source communities to the same extent. And so that issue of free ridership is something that we as an industry need to work on and to try to overcome. In terms of governance, one of the value propositions of the Linux Foundation is to provide these governance frameworks that help organizations better understand how decisions are made and to work collaboratively to establish governance that's open, that's transparent, that relates to decision making of all kinds, whether it's budget formation, whether it is the release of the code, or sometimes even transactional, managing technologies on, for example, a blockchain network. There are many different layers of governance, but having models of governance well established is something that people can find quite regularly at the Linux Foundation, from the Linux kernel, the Linux Foundation broadly, in terms of our own board of directors and technical steering committees. Each project has the opportunity to establish the model of governance that's appropriate for its own community. And that's what's exciting, and it's also extremely necessary to help scale a project. Creates a lot of trust when governance is not overly centralized, but shared among key players.
May I actually want to come back to sort of a few other points that you mentioned that really triggered me. In a way, I think you really also emphasized the human side of open source software and everything around it. And I think we were also a little bit ambitious in our introduction. We said, this is about addressing, grand challenges and wicked problems and so on. And I want to make a little bit that connection in a sense. So when I look at our students, they are becoming more demanding in terms of, the types of values that are important for them, not just only economic value, but also things like sustainability, energy transition, and other things are really becoming very important. And I somehow assume these are the same people that are being employed, by, of course, all these organizations that we're talking about. And I think this is in some sense also the link between, the human dimension and addressing some of those more complex challenges. And in your introduction, you also talked about, this being about, mass collaboration, and I think, we talked about communities. So I'm just trying to connect some of those dots, and I think this is really where I'm interested about your reflections on the sort of the role that open source software plays in addressing those grand challenges through the talent that we talk about, and what is in your view sort of the different model that this is providing that would also help us to connect across organizations, across domains and disciplines, and across industries where some of them are a little bit stuck, let's say, as you also mentioned before. So do you see any movement there? How do you see that?
Well, I think it's very important that the work that we do has value for the world, and that I'm personally extremely excited about the projects that are hosted by the Linux Foundation because of their contribution to helping solve really critical challenges, such as the climate challenge. We have a project vertical called LF Energy that is entirely dedicated to managing the digital transition of the electricity grid and helping improve onboarding of renewable energy sources and managing supply and demand needs as we go forward into a world with electric vehicles and new types of renewable energy sources. And making sure that our communities have a sense that their work is really purpose-driven and serves a greater good. I think it's very motivating when we realize we're working on a project that is bigger than ourselves. It's bigger than any one company. And when we can share examples of collaboration for the benefit of humanity, hopefully we can inspire the speed at which those technologies are implemented outside of the regions in which they were born or the project communities in which they're born, but to help them scale and address some critical social challenges. So the democratization of that code, the fact that it is free and available, whether we're talking about energy technologies or even creative technologies, operating systems, whatever it may be, it's open and it's accessible, and it's a matter of inspiring people to do good things with it.
Wow. I think we have so many topics still open and pending to discuss. But thank you very much, Hilary, for coming to us and to talk about this. And I always say that a good conversation is when we get many good questions, not only the good answers. And I certainly have a lot of inspiration and more questions to open and keep discussing.
Well, thank you, Marisol and Marcel. I'm sorry to interrupt, Marcel.
No. Go. I mean, I also wanted to give you in that sense, maybe opportunity to give your final conclusion, or if you have any final thoughts you want to share with us or our audience.
Well, thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. I think the motto that not all the smart people work for you in your organization. And so go and seek those communities where the smart people live and work with them. And that's the beauty and the freedom that open innovation communities provide. And certainly the open source project communities at the Linux Foundation welcome everybody to get involved and participate and make our code bases better and make our world better. So the invitation is there. Please join us.
No, that's a great conclusion and a great invitation. And I think indeed, as Marisol also says, I think we in a way raised a lot of interesting questions, which is often even more important than answering them in a way. At least it really triggered me quite a lot. In terms of the role of sort of open source software, the communities, the human side, the complex challenges that we want to address, and in a way, I think also the role that open innovation may play as a framework. I mean, this was also part of your conclusion, right? Most of the smart people may work for someone else, so you need to make those connections and you need to manage that somehow. And in that sense, I think it's very much about managing those knowledge flows we talked about, and it's about certain monetary and non-monetary incentives, and it has a lot to do with business models or value in general. So I think that's sort of really something that connected throughout today's session, and I think we're very grateful for that, and a great stepping stone to discuss really further. And in fact, I think we can probably keep talking for many more hours. We'll not do that now, but we'll have an opportunity to stay in touch, of course. Hopefully people will connect one way or the other. And I think the good news is that we can indeed continue also the discussion at the World Open Innovation Conference, where besides you, Hilary, there will be many other top leaders also and academics as well discussing, this and other topics related to the human side of open innovation and the many things connected to that.
I'll look forward to seeing you in November and carrying on this important conversation. I really want to thank you both very much for the opportunity to describe some of the work that we're doing at the Linux Foundation. It's been an absolute honor and a pleasure for me.
Thank you very much, Hilary. Thank you. Wow, Marcel, I must say that I'm flabbergasted. This really is inspiring for me. And I have a note of something that Hilary said to me in one of our conversations, that Linux is a case of human cooperation, not that much about technology. And I think that sums it up also quite nicely. Marcel, I'm looking forward to the World Open Innovation Conference. In fact, I must say that I already have my flights and I'm wishing to speak to all those who will be there, this perfect mix of academia and practice. And of course, we are looking forward to our next podcast episodes. I advise everyone to stay tuned because we will have amazing guests.
Yes, and indeed, some of the other guests that are coming up in our podcast will also be speaking at the conference. So this will all be a great way to connect and, let's say, be open to new ideas and insights.
Yeah, and don't forget to follow us in our webpage, worldopeninnovation.com, and of course in LinkedIn and in Spotify.
Yeah, so thank you, Marcel. Also, big thanks again to Hilary for all your great insights. We'll definitely be in touch, and we'll see each other at the conference to continue the discussion. And also, big thanks to our team, in particular Jacob and our amazing WOIC team at large. And thanks to all of you who are following our episodes here. And we'll see you again next time.
See you.
Bye-bye.
Hi, everyone.